Hello and welcome to Dugout Debrief. I'm your host, Chris DeLuca. This is Boom Broadcasting's one, first, and only baseball-centric podcast. And we are back here once again. We are still in spring training. We are inching closer and closer to the regular season here on this Thursday. And we have a lot of news to cover as we're getting closer and closer to that regular season, that opener in Korea between the Dodgers and Cubs, which I'm really, really looking forward to. So with that being said, we're going to go delve into the news today, and we have a pretty big news story coming out of the Bronx as Gerrit Cole will have Tommy John surgery, the Yankees announced, and will likely miss the entire year. And this is a huge blow for the Yankees. This is a huge blow for their pitching rotation, which has already been dealing with injuries. Luis Gil will miss the first few weeks to months of the season. And Carlos Rodon has had some up and downs in his career. So not a great situation there in the Yankees pitching rotation. Luckily for them, they did sign Max Fried, but still losing Gerrit Cole, losing a perennial Cy Young candidate, not good at all. It looks like it's going to be Max Fried and then Carlos Rodon and then Clark Schmidt are going to be their first three, and that Gerrit Cole name makes that rotation a lot better. Some more news out of the Bronx as well has been Carlos Stanton has a severe elbow injury as of right now. Aaron Boone announced, and yeah, that could be season ending. It's another huge blow for the Yankees as they lose a power hitter right there. He had 27 home runs in 2024. And, the signing of Paul Goldschmidt and Cody Bellinger does help, but there's still a major gap in that lineup. Stanton has been a major power threat in that lineup. So even with older, aging Goldschmidt and kind of a wild card Cody Bellinger as he was in the North Side, still not going to be exactly the best start to the Yankees season. And by the way, this is our ranking of each team's best player. We're in the top, we're in the top 14, and you will see New York Yankee somewhere on this list. You can probably guess which team or which player that New York Yankee will be. That being said, speaking of another elite team, the Los Angeles Dodgers announced that they re-signed Dave Roberts to a record-breaking deal, adding 3 years to the deal that already had 1 year left on it, and he's going to be making about $8 million a year, making him the highest-paid manager in MLB history. And after World Series win, it makes sense. I mean, the team's ability to rally around him has really proved with that ring. He's proven that he is willing to step back and let other coaches make decisions, like Mark Pryor with some pitching decisions, which has been an issue with him in previous years when the Dodgers lost his 2 consecutive World Series, when they were knocked out in 2019 in the DS by the Washington Nationals. There are some questionable decisions, but it looks like that recently Dave Roberts has been willing to step back and let other coaches make decisions when he feels necessary. And then when he makes decisions, it seems like it's been getting called pretty well. So I got to agree with Dave Roberts being back. I had mixed feelings on him, but the World Series proved me wrong, definitely. And really, there weren't many major signings. There's a few major names still on the board right now, like Anthony Rizzo, who's kind of struggled with injuries. He's kind of been on the down run right now. But Hector Neris signs a minor league deal with the Atlanta Braves, the former Philly favorite. I'm sure Philly fans love to hear me say that. He's had some ups and downs, but I think it's not a bad deal. He can go start in Gwinnett, see what he can do down there. I think he's 35, 37, something like that. So, high risk or low risk, high reward, actually, low risk, high reward. So, yeah, Hector Neris to the Braves. There weren't really many major signings. I kind of went through, I looked around. But with that being said, we're going to be diving into each team's best player. And we're in the top 14 right now. And that top 14 is going to go start out with Jose Altuve of the Houston Astros. And I know a lot of you guys are going to be saying, oh, why isn't it Jordan Alvarez? Why isn't it Jordan Alvarez? And it was very close. Jordan has more home runs, 36 versus Altuve's 20. Better batting average, 308 versus Altuve's 295. But Altuve remains a factor defensively, leading the MLB in fielding percentage at 989. And I'm making this list more based on overall factors, Altuve's ability to hold that locker room together, even as the Astros kind of began their process of moving into a new direction, not necessarily tanking. I don't think they're going to be terrible, but moving past the days of Alex Bregman, moving past the days of Alex Tucker, Justin Verlander, all those names are now gone. And Altuve has still managed to hold together that locker room. I think that lineup will still be pretty solid. I mean, you got guys like Paredes, Alvarez, you have to mention Alvarez, Christian Walker, Yainer Diaz, and Jeremy Pena, who I've still been pretty big on. But that rotation remains the most suspect with Hunter Brown, Framber Valdez, and Blanco leading it. A lot of question marks there, but I still think the Astros will be okay. But division winners, I don't know. But that being said, number 13, we're going to be moving to my pick to win that division, and or a player on that team, and that is the Texas Rangers. That is Mr. Corey Seager. Corey Seager at number 13 here had another good year, even though he got hurt toward the end of the year. He still has been incredibly productive. 30 home runs. He had a 5 WAR and 21 stolen bases, and he's going to be ready for opening day. And I think that's going to be a big help to that Rangers lineup that was pretty banged up this year. The big thing is you just got to hope that Adolis Garcia is more productive. He had a big strikeout problem, but that Rangers lineup and that Rangers rotation is still there. So Corey Seager, number 13, I think it's a pretty solid pick here. And with that being said, we're sticking to the Western divisions, but not the same league, as we're going to be going to the San Diego Padres. We're going to be going to Fernando Tatis Jr. and another one where I was really close to that. I was very close. I was between him and Manny Machado. Manny Machado, I still think, is a perennial Gold Glove, or at least Gold Glove candidate at third base. And Fernando Tatis Jr. did win a Gold Glove the year before last. He did have a down year compared to last, only hitting 21 home runs and only stealing 11 bases, but he did miss time. And if he can keep all those tools together, he's by far the Padres' best player because he's a full tool player. Healthy Tatis benefits that roster. They have guys like Luis Arraez, Jackson Merrill, who would have been my pick for Rookie of the Year in the National League if Paul Skeens didn't have one of the best rookie pitching seasons ever. Can't forget about Manny Machado, Bogarts, and Jake Cronenworth as well. They signed Jason Hayward, and the pitching rotation is still good. Cease, King, Darvish. I mean, it's nothing to blink at. So I still think they're going to put up a fight for that division against the Dodgers. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people are saying it's going to be. Next, at number 11, we have Bryce Harper. We have everybody's favorite player, Bryce Harper. And I think that he is going to continue his dominance. The only thing that really limits Bryce Harper is his where he is position-wise, because he's had to move mostly either to first base or DH. And that's really the only thing that's affected him, because he was a fantastic right fielder. But, due to injuries and all that, they moved him out of the outfield, which is smart. They want to keep him around as long as possible. They've also moved him more into the second spot, which I think is also a good idea, moving him to the second spot as opposed to having him third or fourth when you got guys like Alec Boehm, Nick Castellanos, and Kyle Schwarber. Bryce Harper, he finished 6th in MVP voting. He's done a lot as a DH in first base. He's a fantastic fit in Philly. I mean, personality and talent. He's got that fiery personality, and you got to succeed quick in Philly. And that's exactly what Bryce Harper did. Is when he got there, he hit the ground running, because Philly, they don't give you much slack, to say the least, when it comes to your talent, especially after a big contract like that. I mean, just look how they treat even people in other sports. Look how Joel Embiid's been with his injuries and how Philly's been reacting to that. Look how the reaction of Jalen Hurts was initially before he won the Super Bowl, made the Super Bowl, lost, and then won it. Everything is very heavily critiqued in Philly, let's just say. I definitely put them up there in a city like New York and Boston as, hey, you got to succeed quick, because if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. But as I mentioned before, I think the Phillies are going to be pretty darn good, even with the Mets signing everybody in the world outside of guys the Dodgers signed. I still think the Phillies are going to win that division, or at least put up a pretty darn good fight for a 95 to 100 win team. And Next, we got another Northeastern team. And speaking of Boston, we got the Boston Red Sox. And for the Boston Red Sox, this was another really close one for me. I was really up in the air of who I was going to pick. And I ended up going with Alex Bregman. It was really close between him and Devers. I know there was all the discussion about Devers wanting to move positions or not wanting to move from third. Now they're going to have to put Bregman at second because Devers is the guy who's been there, and he really doesn't want to lose a third baseman position. He doesn't want to move to DH, even if it might be a little bit better of a move for him because he's kind of been a defensive liability, and Bregman's been perennially a pretty good defenseman. I mean, he got a Gold Glove in 2024, 4.1 WAR, and he had 151 hits. I think that he's got pretty much every single tool except the speed tool. But because he only stole, I think, like 2 to 5 bases this year, he could have done a little bit better than that. But you don't need all those tools in your third baseman. So give me Alex Bregman with the Boston Red Sox. He's looking like he's probably going to be around the third spot right now. You got other power guys like Tristan Casas, Trevor Story, if he can ever bounce back. Boston's been doing a decent amount, and then especially in the pitching rotation too, locking down Garrett Crochet and then Walker Buehler as well. You got Tanner Houck there. I did see that Brian Bello is going to start the season on the IL, but that's okay. I do think Boston can put up a decent fight for that division, maybe even win it now, especially with Gerrit Cole being out. And yeah, so give me Bregman for the Boston Red Sox as their best overall player. And if you disagree with any of these, put them in the comments. I'd love to debate it. I'm sure Michael would love reading some baseball takes here in the comments. The Boone Broadcasting president, which make sure to tune into Out of Pocket. I've been on and off on that show. They've had some really great coverage of the NFL free agency, some draft previews as well. And then they got the pro wrestling content as well. So make sure you're listening to Out of Pocket. So next, we got a team that has been pretty darn out of pocket this entire offseason. We got the Toronto Blue Jays at number 9 here, ladies and gentlemen. And we have Vlad Jr., who proved a lot of the haters wrong, winning a Silver Slugger, hitting 30 home runs this year after a huge down year being the cover of MLB The Show. He suffered a show curse, and then he just turned around and decided to be one of the better power hitters in the game, the best player that the Blue Jays had this year, and just a conundrum of a year that they had. I mean, they have him looking like he's going to be at the second spot. They went for Santander. They got George Springer, Bo Bichette's there, but overall they just did not do enough in the pitching rotation. Gausman, Barrios, and Bassett and Scherzer, yeah, but still, it's not been enough. So I think that team is going to struggle a lot, but Vlad Jr. will not struggle. And he has 1 year left. And the major question is, will Toronto re-sign him? Will they let him go? I mean, the Blue Jays are in a situation where it's either you're going to have to go and try and build that team right now, or you're going to have to completely rebuild because you still got names there. You still have value there. I mean, I think a team at the deadline would gladly take a Vlad Jr. I think most teams who are close would. Issue is a few of them are in your division, such as the Toronto Blue Jays. But hey, I could see a team like the next team we're about to talk about take him on, and that is the Atlanta Braves at number 8 with Chris Sale. Chris Sale, Cy Young Award winner this year, and you could have gone Acuna, you could have gone Olsen, even a healthy Albies you could have gone. But a Cy Young, you can't say no to that. 2.38 ERA. He led in wins, he led in Ks, he led in ERA plus, he led in FIP. And, this was a guy that a lot of people wrote off as early as just the beginning to middle of last year. He was wrote off. He consistently had elbow injuries and other types of arm injuries. He had really struggled, his pitching mechanics. A lot of people blamed for being the reason why he had all those injuries. But, here he is. He won the Cy Young. And a healthy Sale is very scary, even at 38. In Atlanta's rotation, it might be a little bit top heavy with him and Ronaldo Lopez. So that's why I kind of wanted them to go out and try and get another arm. I would have loved if they would have gone for a guy like Nick Pivetta. I think that would have been a great number 4 guy, number 3 guy, because they got Garrett Holmes, then Ian Anderson, who I feel like kind of just fell off the face of the earth. But it's a very top-heavy rotation there in Atlanta. But Chris Sale has taken a lot of that weight, which is really good for the Braves. And now we're really starting to get into the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of the best players, because we're getting into the top 7 now. And, some of these teams have a lot of names, some of them really don't. And this one does have a lot of names. And that is the Baltimore Orioles. And another one where you could have gone a few people, but I went for the statistically the best player and a guy who I hope gets paid, a guy I hope that is a cornerstone for that team at third base, and that is Gunnar Henderson of the Baltimore Orioles. 9.1 WAR, 37 home runs, 893 OPS, and he had 21 stolen bases. And next week's the award prediction show, so I'm not going to give any spoilers, but he will be on the list of people I have for the AL MVP. I mean, he's going to be on my list for that. I think he's a full tool guy. The offense is there for Baltimore. It's just they're waiting on a pitching staff. There are so many names they could have gone with, and they didn't. I really wanted them to go for a guy like Walker Buehler, a guy like Gerrit Cole. They didn't go for any of that, and they're just kind of content where they are, which is not good for Baltimore, especially when you have teams like the Red Sox, teams like the Yankees, how good that bullpen was, teams like the Rays who always surprise people. And even Toronto, who has all those names in that rotation, but just can't seem to put it all together at the same time. So Gunnar Henderson, I think, is going to be a big face of baseball, especially being in the AL East, being in an up-and-coming team like Baltimore, who has a lot of regular season success, but so far has just not been able to get over that hump. It's like they just disappear every time the calendar changes to October. So hopefully Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, and the whole gang can just finally get it together, because Baltimore, I want to see them at least make an ALCS within the next year or two. And while this core is still together, I want to see them at least make a World Series. I mean, your owner owns the Magna Carta. That is pretty darn expensive. So hopefully he can afford to go pay a pitching staff too. Because I think when you own a baseball team and you also own the Magna Carta, I think you might have enough money to maybe pay a Gerrit Cole. But what do I know? I'm not an owner. And speaking of teams that do a lot with a little when it comes to finances, we have the Cleveland Guardians, and we have Jose Ramirez. We have J-Ram. He's probably a top 3 favorite player of mine right now in baseball. I was close between him and Clase, but again, as we did with number 14, we were talking about the Houston Astros earlier in the program. This is about overall success with your team. This is what you bring to the table as a complete 5-tool athlete. So Emmanuel Clase statistically had one of the best closing seasons ever, but a closer only pitches 1 to 2 innings every game or every other game or so. So I ended up going with Jose Ramirez here. He had a 6.8 WAR. He had 39 home runs. He had also had 39 doubles, excuse me. And, he has pretty much every factor of the game. In my opinion, he's the best pure hitter in baseball. He hits a lot of home runs. He hits a lot of base hits, and he's got a decent amount of speed, especially for his size. He is perennially a defensive highlight reel, and he has a no-nonsense mentality, too, which I really think helps his case for another potential MVP. But again, we're going to be talking about that next week on Dugout Debrief, or the week after. I don't know if I'm doing National League or American League first. We'll figure that out. But yeah, I mean, that Cleveland lineup, I still think is really good with Stephen Kwan, Kyle Manzardo, Carlos Santana, Lane Thomas, Will Brennan. The other Naylor is still there, Bo Naylor, and you can't forget about Brian Rocchio. And that rotation is still solid as well. Tanner Bybee, Ben Lively, Gavin Williams, Luis Ortiz, Tristan McKenzie, and then hopefully Shane Bieber can get healthy too. Then, of course, that bullpen is still great with guys like Cade Smith and aforementioned Emmanuel Clase. Bullpen is still the best in the game by a mile. That Guardians bullpen is fantastic. And I still think that they can be a perennial contender in that division. And hey, now we're in the top 5. We're really, really getting down there right now. And next we have the New York Mets. Next we have Juan Soto. We have the prize of the offseason, the cash cow of the offseason, the one that everyone wanted, the one that got away for 29 other teams, but one got him. That's the New York Mets. Juan Soto led in runs with 128. He hit 41 home runs and he won a Silver Slugger. He's a game changer. And he stays healthy too, which is the most important aspect of his game, if you ask me. As a man stays healthy, He's a very dedicated player. He has shown that he just wants to play the game. He obviously wants money. Everyone wants money. You can't blame him. If I got offered as much money as the New York Mets offered me or offered him, and I got offered that much money, I would have gone for it too. I think he's going to be really, really good. I think he's going to be a game changer in there. But again, baseball, you got to have a full lineup to be able to win a World Series. Look at the teams that have won recently, like the Dodgers and the Astros and the Nationals and the Braves. They had all tools. They had the lineup all the way through. They had the rotation all the way through, and they had the bullpen all the way through, too. Those three aspects are the most important aspects of the game. Even if you're lacking individual statistical categories within those aspects of the game, such as, I don't know, control, stealing bases. You're lacking even a little bit of power. Sometimes you can still win World Series through small ball. I still think the Dodgers did that. But yeah, Juan Soto at number 5. And now we're getting into number 4. And number 4 is going to be the AL Cy Young Award winner of the Detroit Tigers. That is Tarik Skubal. And he led in pretty much every relevant pitching stat this year. He had 18 wins. He had 2.39 ERA, 228 Ks, and a 2.49 FIP. He pretty much led in everything that you need. And he carried that rotation. He, in my opinion, was, as a pitcher, the biggest factor in his team making it as far as they did into that divisional round to fall to the Guardians. But still, it's really hard for a pitcher to put a team on their back because they can only pitch once every 5 days, once every 6 days. But he did it as much as possible, probably in my lifetime, if not ever. Tarik Skubal did the most for his team by a mile out of anyone this year. And, that lineup still, is a little bit rough. You have the playoff legend Kerry Carpenter, you have Gleyber Torres, you have Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, who's had a real big bounce back. But that rotation, they got Flaherty, Reese Olson, Casey Mize, and Kenta Maeda, which still, I think the Tigers are going to be really good, or they're going to be kind of mediocre. But Skubal will not be the reason that they're mediocre if they are. That man, I say he's going to have 20 wins this year. He was fantastic. He was nasty. And I hope he continues his dominance. So we're getting into the top 3 now, ladies and gentlemen, and we have the surprise. We have the surprise pick here. Probably a lot of people would have had me having him probably more towards the 8 to 7 range, but I'm a big fan of this guy. This is my show, so I'm biased. I'm sorry. It is Bobby Witt Jr. It is Aaron Schneider's team, the host of the Gridiron Address. It is their best player, the Kansas City Royals' best player, Bobby Witt Jr. at number 3. Another guy who did the most for his team by a mile. 9.4 WAR. He played 161 games this year, which is not something you see very often. League leading 3.3 or 3.32 batting average, 9.74 fielding percentage, which earned him a Gold Glove. He also earned himself a Silver Slugger this year. By a mile, he would have been the MVP if not for Aaron Judge in the American League. He lived up to the hype as the second overall pick. And the Royals added other guys like Jonathan India. They also have Vinny Pasquantino, Salvador Perez, who has continued to play at an elite level, Kyle Isabel, MJ Melendez. That Royals lineup is still pretty good, but Bobby Witt Jr. carried that team offensively, along with that great pitching rotation, which Brady Singer's obviously gone, Cole Reagan, Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha, Michael Lorenzen too, which I think was a great signing for those Royals. I still think they're going to be good again this year. They're another surprise team. There are a lot of surprise teams out of the AL Central, but Bobby Witt Jr., I was not surprised about his success this year. I'm so happy to see him do as well as he did, and I hope that he can be another MVP candidate here in 2025. And now we got the top 2. It is time for the top 2, everyone. And I think you guys can guess who it is. Who's going to be 1? Who's going to be 2? A lot of people can argue. Jason, host from 3 from Deep, can argue about this one because number 2 is the New York Yankees' Aaron Judge. I'm sorry, Jason. He had a 10.8 WAR, 58 home runs, 144 RBIs, 133 walks, 4.58 OPS, 701 slugging, and 392 stolen bases. By the way, all those were league leading. That is insane to me. He's limited his Ks, and despite the playoff struggles, he deserved that AL MVP by a mile. I think that he has been a true leader for that team. He's the captain of the Yankees, and that is a pretty big honor. So Aaron Judge at number 2, he led the American League in pretty much every single offensive statistic by a mile, number 2, but by a mile, number 1. I'm not even being biased here because he is the new face of baseball. He is the Los Angeles Dodgers DH, about to be pitcher this year, hopefully. That is Shohei Ohtani. Not much else can be said. The face of baseball. He can finally bring the sport back into the mainstream. He is the first real household name that we have had since the early 2000s, I think, in baseball. Yes, you've had Mike Trout. A lot of people know who that is, but everyone now knows who Shohei Ohtani is. He's on every mainstream news outlet, whether if it's sports or not sports. His relevance to the game internationally that we've seen. He's brought Japanese players to the United States like Sasaki, like Imanaga. He has also brought the sport itself to Japan. You have people staying up until 5 o'clock in the morning to go watch the Dodgers play. Objectively, talent-wise, I will say it is a tie between him and Aaron Judge. It is close. They both led their respective leagues in pretty much every statistic. Shohei Ohtani had 54 home runs, 130 RBIs, 59 stolen bases, and he plays all factors. And as I said, plus he's going to pitch this year. And do I think he's going to be the best pitcher in baseball, best pitcher in the National League? No, I don't think so. I find it kind of ridiculous that Fantasy Baseball and ESPN ranks him as the number 1 best fantasy pitcher. I have to disagree with that, especially because we don't even know when he's going to be pitching. So I'm not really agreeing with how they're structuring that, especially making him a pitcher. I would much rather them just keep him as a DH. But he's the number 1 overall player fantasy wise, which I agree with. But I don't really agree with him being the best overall pitcher. I think there are guys I would have put above him. With that being said, that is our top players by team. We have done this over a 2-week span. We did 30 through 15 last week. We did 14 through number 1 this week. So if you want to go back, see the guys before, go ahead and go back to last week's episode. I'd love you guys just to give me your takes. I mean, a lot of these I think were kind of easy once you got down to the top 10. But there were a couple in the first episode that I wasn't really sure where to put them. You know, we had some surprises, like we had the White Sox being, I think, we had Luis Robert Jr. being around 26, 27. So, yeah, with that being said, I really think that there are a lot of surprises this year. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. was a surprise to a lot of people, not to me, because I was a big believer in him, and I'm happy he lived up to the hype. Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge rounding out number 2. You can't really go wrong. You could have put one at 1. You could have put the other at 2. Vice versa. It really doesn't matter. But if you have any disagreements, come at me in the comments. I'd love to hear it. With that being said, we got our trivia, and then we're about to get out of here. So last week's trivia question: who is the second oldest player active going into 2025? And then we'll go 1, 2, 3. And that is the man, the myth, the legend, the man of many uniforms, the journeyman, the Ryan Fitzpatrick of baseball. That is Jesse Chavez at age 41, now playing for Michael Davis's Texas Rangers. And this week, who is the only Hall of Famer to go in as an Arizona Diamondback? Who is the only Hall of Famer to go in as an Arizona Diamondback? And there's only been one of them, which kind of based on their time, which they turned 30 this year, by the way, when it comes to when they were officially announced as an organization. Diamondbacks and the Rays turned 30. So with that being said, this has been Dugout Debrief. I just want to make sure to give shout outs to all our other great shows. It Stinks broke the Boom broadcasting record for the most views. So hats off to Sean breaking that record. Make sure to tune in to Out of Pocket. I've been on there on and off when I can be. Like I said earlier in the program, they're covering the draft, they're covering free agency, they're covering the NBA. And speaking of the NBA, make sure to tune in to Jason's 3 from Deep. He just dropped an episode on Wednesday. There's a lot. The NBA has been heating up. And then make sure finally to tune into the Gridiron Address. It's on Sundays. We usually got it sometime between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I was on there this past week doing my mock draft with Jason and Aaron Schneider, the man, the myth, the legend. So again, I want to thank you for tuning in to Dugout Debrief, and I hope you have a great week. I will see you next Thursday for the MVP or the award predictions. See you next week.